project I'm working on really in my new domain is getting some of the Cities of Death scenery up to scratch. So I thought I'd quickly go through where I am, and I'll probably video as I go and see what people think. So the first thing I've done, obviously I've assembled my pieces. The set's available on GW. It's the Imperial Sector, and you get enough really to build. I mean, just very quickly, I've built this one building, which is the manufacturing room, which is inside out at the moment. I've got part of a Sanctum Imperialis, I believe it's called. And I've got a Basilica Administrum over there, all nice and black. That's something else. And two smaller outbuildings left from the leftover pieces. One which is another bit of Basilica, and the other one is another Sanctum. So basically, I'm going to try and paint them all up, scene them, base them, and do all the good things. And I thought I'd have a go at something I can do, and maybe share it and see what people think. I'm no master painter, I'm no master crafter, but I'm a sort of adventurous hobbyist, and I'll have a go. So the first thing I've done really is I've cut a base for the piece out of this particular one's out of an old piece of sort of modelling plywood that I had, but I've got generally I use MDF, but I've covered it in good old-fashioned glue, and then PVA, and then from that I've scattered it with a mix of sort of fine and sharper sands. Some coffee grounds are in there, if I remember correctly, because they were to hand, and some of the contents of Great Britain's beaches, which I collect occasionally when I go there. Of course, I do good things as well while I'm there to offset my minor theft. And I've dremeled out a couple of holes here, which don't really show up so well, and they're kind of very, very narrow, where I'm going to at some point put in some of the, just to flick it up, some of this stuff to still water to try and create some water effects on the ground. So the intention is to have a sort of exploded building, a lot of rubble, a lot of leftovers, and I'll build it up and try and make it look as authentic as I'm capable of doing. I'm no master painter, but we'll see where it goes. So just what I have done, so this is the before, so I think everyone can do this. It's just really get it going, get gluing, let it dry. This is the other building which I've started on, so same fault. I've got a couple of little holes that are in here, which is where I'm going to do maybe some more water effects. And I've spray painted the whole thing in black with Vallejo Surface Primer, using my airbrush, although the brands are available. And I've begun the painting process on it. So just to flick it round, I haven't done the inside yet, I'm doing that next, but what I've done is I've taken Army Painter Angel Green in this case, and I've watered it quite sort of almost 40% Liquitex airbrush medium, but I mean you could use water. I've used the medium because I think it keeps the pigments together quite well, and I've mixed it with the rest of it Angel Green, and I've very lightly sprayed the building from a distance, and it's quite subtle, so you should hopefully be able to see that the black is still showing through. It's meant to look like it's kind of been unloved for quite some time. I then use some of the Army Painter green skin paint just to give it a slight variation, so as it moves to the top of the building the colour gets very slightly lighter, sort of presumably as the sun has slightly bleached it out and there's less things blowing around it. So, and I'm not sure what the physics of the world should be, but it looks quite pretty. So I've done the outside, so I'm going to pause this. What I'm going to do now is really start to work on the inside. So I'm going to paint up this side of the building, and then we'll see where we go from there. So here's after the first coat on the inside of the Dark Angel Green, or Angel Green I should say, which is, after a very sort of, the paint is very, very thin, so you've got to be quite careful how you apply it. It can get quite blotchy, and there is actually one area where I have blotched it slightly because I left the airbrush there too long. I've also found that the sort of mini top tip of my own is that by using this stuff, I found adding just a drop of this into the airbrushes, which is having a lot less blockages now when I'm trying to mix my own paints. I don't really like buying the pre-done airbrush paints. I think that it seems to be quite expensive when you can use the normal paints and just thin them down with the likes of this good old Liquitex airbrush medium. Although there's nothing wrong with them, and I'll probably end up getting more of them, but if I can get away with it, I prefer to use what I've already got. So that's it. So I mean, the camera's obviously, it's quite bright, so then it's not going to come out too clearly, but generally little bits of the green, so it's kind of what's left over. And once this is dried, I'm going to very quickly highlight it with a airbrush highlight it by just taking it up with the green skin before I'll start getting worked with the brush. So just gentle highlights, pick out some of the areas on the edges, one angle, and I just put a bit of the lighter green in just to give a bit of colour contrast. So green paint's in and mostly dry, just going to give it a little bit longer. What I'm going to do now, so basically it's greener in parts and slightly faded in others, which, you know, if you were out exposed to the winds and rain, I'm hoping that's what it would look like. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint the base. Now, rather than using my nice expensive paints, which, you know, well, they're not that expensive, but you go through them very quickly, especially when you paint areas as white-sided. So I'm going to try some of this slightly cheaper stuff, which is larger tubes. I've got a couple of them. And I'm going to try this burnt umber, and I bought this for a massive £1.50. And I'm going to see how that goes. I'm going to try and mix it up in the airbrush. I'm going to give it a go. Worst case scenario, I'll spray it all black and start again. The floor, that is. Right, I'll put this down and we'll see what happens. Comes out quite well. So I've completed the ground spray with the burnt umber cheaper paint, and it's gone pretty well. I've quite deliberately oversprayed around the bases. I think mud and stuff would kick up over time and just weather. And I've gone all the way around. Not gone too thick with it, so that it's coloured the stones a little bit, because I'm trying to sort of make it look a little bit like it's near a riverbed sort of area. And I'm going to dry brush it later on when it's all nice and dry, and I think it'll look rather nice. So I'm now going to start painting the walkways. I'm going to use the Army Painter Gunmetal, because it's quite a dull metallic colour, which I'll put washes on to bring it out. With the lack of a tripod, which I'm going to have to get, and it's quite difficult, but for now, that gives you a basic idea. I'll put the camera down. Once I've done it, I'll come back. Okay, I've brushed on the gunmetal paint. Just to say, throughout this video I'm using Army Painter paints. I do equally use the GW ones and the odd Vallejo one. It just happens that for this particular purpose the Army Painter ones seem to be my preference, but there's no particular bias towards one or the other. I did get a full set of these quite a while ago, and they're very good, very cheap for what you get for them. But anyway, yeah, so now I'm going to, obviously these look completely bright and new. I'm going to wash them down. I'm going to wash them with what GW recommends on one of their videos, because it does come up quite well. So I'm going to use Adhoc Earthshade and Null Noir, although I'll probably use the, just because of the volume of it, I think I'll use the Army Painter Dark Tone as well. So I'll use Dark Tone and the Adhoc Earthshade, and I'll kind of blend them together. Later on I intend to make some weathering powder and sort of put that in there as well. But hopefully we'll get to that. I've kind of painted over a whole tile with Adhoc Earthshade, and then I'm just spotting in the Dark Tone where I think it's going to add some value. So little bits here and there over the skull. So it gives, basically, I'm hoping when it dries it'll take some of the shine out of it, and sort of I can weather it as well later on. But I'm going quite heavy in with the washes. So not sort of, this is an old brush. I'm just basically absolutely jamming it on neat, and hopefully it might take a couple of goes, it'll come out looking like it's been well loved. So I've got all my washes on here now. It's a bit of a See, some areas are more agraxy and some areas are more dark tone. I try to push the dark tone into the holes in the plates so it dries and sort of gives a bit of definition. What I'll probably do now, this will take a while to dry, I'll probably leave it, and I think then it's going to be a case of starting to pick out the main detail of the building. But again, it's going to be quite muted. I'll be using bronze, so the doors, the whatever the things are on the outside, the sort of buttresses, and hopefully it will start to look good. So I'll get my stuff together, let this dry, and I'll carry on. Okay, so the washes are pretty much dry now. Looks quite good, quite dirty. I put quite a lot on, with the view that it's sort of seen quite a bit of weather. Next plan, bit of the old mighty Balthazar gold, and I'm going to go around the buttresses, pick out the doors, and I'm going to and ah about whether or not what I'm going to do with some of the finer detail. I may do it the same colour, I may sort of use pick it up with some of the later highlighting. Right, I'll get back. Okay, so 3 coats of Balthazar gold later on all of the buttresses and the doors. I'm not picking out any other things yet because I'm not sure what I'm going to do with them. So lanterns and what have you, they'll probably end up in similar colours, but I'm not thinking about that just yet. I put 3 coats on. I've quite deliberately made them very thin, so they do look a little bit rough and ready, but they are generally bronze. I think that's the way to do it. They stand out. I mean, the Balthazar gold's actually a pretty decent bronze colour, and it really I think it looks quite nice. It goes with the green. So at some point, I've got to choose now whether to put some verdigris on it, sort of the nylide oxide. I can never remember its name, but I'll and ah about that. But I think what I might do first is call out some of the highlights using some of this dry golden griffin. I'm going to give it a go. It'll either work or it won't. I've had this sitting on the shelf for a while and I'm going to try it. So let's see what happens. So did some dry brushing using that Griffin Gold. Quite pleased with it actually. It seems to work quite well. I've pulled out some of the detail off the building, so sort of some of the outer areas I've had to touch up around the bits where I've clipped with the brush, but just at the first go. But generally it's come out pretty well. It does. I've done it quite thin so that it looks like it's slightly worn. Some of the skulls are, especially lower down, are slightly more worn, as if the leaf's worn away. The bronze doors look quite nice there as well. I'm going to put a wash on them in a moment. But generally, just a relatively heavy dry brush on the main areas, and then sort of gentle as I move further down. So it seems to have picked out a detail quite well. I've got same on both sides. So I've pulled out sort of the emblems, and then same thing again really. But the camera probably makes them look slightly too bright, because it does, but they're actually a lot more stunted than it looks. Generally quite good. So next step is tidy it up and then do some washing. The first wash is going to be army painted green tone, although you could use any really green tone for this bit. I've mixed it in with some flow retarder and slow dry, so that it can get around a little bit and I can move it about. And basically I'm going to wash over these green areas with the skulls on. So just a brief example of it. So difficult to do without a tripod. I really must get a tripod. And I wash it down, just push it over and push it in. Try and bring out some of the detail, or get rid of some of my overpasses with the gold. But I don't really care if it's got a little bit of a stain in areas, as long as it's tidy. And this, I've used this before. The reason I always use this wash, the army painter washes are particularly good. I just find that they really do what they say they're going to do, and they're not too wishy-washy. Whereas some of the GW ones I've used have been a bit thin, although some of them are particularly good. So you pay your choice, you make your choices basically. But as this is supposed to be a ruined building, of course I'm not that fussed about how smart the sort of what I leave behind is and where I put it. So I'm just going for it really and just chucking it on. Anyway, I'll be back. It's difficult to see. I put the green wash in. I've basically washed it between all the gold areas, and and I think it just slightly brings out some of the gold and makes it darken some of the areas behind them. I've also put it on every one of the sort of figures in the windows just to put a bit of colour change against them. But I'll probably hit them with some of the things as well. I still haven't decided what I'm going to do with the lanterns, so I'm just ignoring them until I get to the end. But generally, yeah, I've washed around some of the scroll area and what have you, trying to pick out the fact that the gold has worn away, so it's old. And then, yeah, basically done repeated it all around the building, same on both sides. Although on the other side, of course, it's less applicable as there's a lot less detail. So, it'll be the Nuln Oil. I'm going to put this on the doors, buttresses, basically try and give it a bit more of a weathered look and get some definition in on the detail, on the wells between the raised sections. And then we'll see where we go next. I'm just going to crack on with this, quick wash. It's a little update doing this. Some of the areas in this model are actually so flat that when you put the oil on it just sort of sits in pools. So to sort of make it work a bit better, I'm slapping on the old Nuln Oil and then washing it off with a brush. And if you do, you basically, as quickly as you can, you get the brush on there and it takes it off the top, which doesn't make it look quite, it was looking even too dirty for sort of what I'm aiming for, but gets the detail in there. But you've got to get in there quickly with your brush. So I'm going to stop this now because I can't unfortunately film it. So yeah, so just to say, absolutely slapped on the Nuln Oil and then just brush it away over the model. You get the coating you want, but you don't lose the effect. And basically it leaves the black in the holes, but doesn't turn it into a mucky mess. So got the Nuln Oil on. Normally, of course, as most people would already know, you would go over and highlight back across the areas where the oil went or the washes went. But I've quite deliberately, sort of by wiping it off, got enough of the detail in the gaps. And it's not in all of them because it's meant to look worn. But they also look dirty, like they haven't been looked after. So by rubbing it off, it seems to come up with the effect as I would like it. It's left the bronze looking less flashy, although the camera probably won't pick that up as well. And it looks a little bit unloved, which is what the intention's meant to be. It's actually very hard to make a model and try and make it look unloved, because the natural thing you want to do is get in there and get onto the detail. But I thought, if this thing's supposed to be in a war zone and it's being blown to bits, it should really look like it had a fight at some point in its existence. Right, so now it's really on to sort of extra details, and I'll just going to have a break, I think, and see what I think, let some of this oil dry, and then start picking it out. I decided just to actually do a little bit of edge highlighting with that Griffin Gold on the edge of the pills, very, very gentle. I thought it would actually bring them out quite nicely. Just a really gentle edge on it, just using a very small dry brush along the edges of the door. I've almost kind of slightly allowed it to stain in bits to almost look like it's something rubbing away, but only very, very gently. And I've picked out the corners or the rough edges of some of these pillars, just because I thought it just looked a bit green. So I just put it out. Equally, unlike before, I decided to go slightly further and just picked out the bottom of some of these statues, or these like consoles, of once for the better description, there's sort of patterns that sit beneath them. Basically sort of try and, not with the details, just showing there may have been something more there in the past. And if I flick onto things, I'm not that bothered. It's meant to look a little messy. So far, it's looking quite good. Gonna use a bit more of this dry paint. I went out one day, I went mad and bought loads of them. I bought the whole range pretty much. I've never really ever got around to using them much. But I'm going to use some of this Terminator stone on the ground, very gently. My brush is actually very, very slightly claggy, so I'm being careful. But just try and add a little bit of definition on some of these stones because it's a bit brown. So just to try and colour out a little bit, but nothing too mad. I'm going to smash over it with a bit of a wash as well, just a bit of a grell and earth, trying to make sure it's not too samey. Oh, and one's come off, but that's life. And if I do this well. It's actually very hard to paint. I've got lots of admiration for people who do lots of videos on YouTube, because I have to say it is incredibly difficult sometimes to remember to do things in order and put them on film, but probably even more so, it's difficult to actually hold the camera in one place and look at another. So I definitely need a tripod. Okay, I'll finish this. I'll probably go into a bit more depth on it now, but that's pretty good. I might put another colour on it as well, maybe a slightly lighter brown, just to sort of give a bit of variation and come at it from the opposite angle. And I'll do around the edges. So the plan now, I think I'll finally tackle these lanterns which I've been putting off. I think I'm not gonna really film it. I don't think there's much point, but I'm gonna paint the metal parts with doing a base of Balthasar gold, same at the bottoms, but then I'm gonna go over them with a highlight of brass scorpion. I may even do the whole thing, sort of see how it looks. In the middle, something bright. So I like the flames, so the lights I'm going to imagine they're on. Probably something bluish, because it's just me. And we'll see how it looks. I've applied the Balthasar gold to the lanterns, and I'm just waiting for that to dry. As I said before, I'm just about to, while I wait for that to finish, I'm going to put some Adhoc shade across the space. So that's how to use lots and lots of wash. I'm going to water it down, save some money. And my kids will go insane outside. I'll do that now, and that'll be a quick job, and then I'll be back on to painting the lantern. So far it's going really well. Right, so I've got my Adhoc shade watered down, got a tiny bit of flow retardant in it, I don't know why I did that, to be honest, but it's there. And I'm just gonna, it's watered down probably 50% above its normal value, and then basically I'm just gonna slap it all over, I think, whole base. And I'm hoping that when this dries, it should just soften some of that white, which is not, well, grey, Terminator stone, and make it a little bit subtler, and hopefully make it look really good. And I'm suspecting, well, I'm just really going over the bits where I put the dry brushing, just to soften it, because it was a bit bright, and I think that should dry quite nicely, gives a bit of an alternative texture to it. And I've run out, but I'm going to do the same around the bits I've done stuck to the front, and that should be it. And now then I'm going to get back on this lantern, and then I'll take it from there. I can't even remember what I've got left to do. It's not that much. I don't like spending hours and hours and hours and hours and hours painting. I'm not into Golden Demon Awards. I'm just like to having a bit of nice scenery. Right, so I've got a light on overhead this now, so it's pretty brightened up a little bit, because it's starting to get dim outside. I've painted the lanterns in the sort of chain of the back is still Balthasar gold, but I've highlighted well, it's actually quite hard to see, but it's very subtle. It's good in the real world, but I'm not sure the camera would see it. But I used with the brass scorpion. I've gone for Warpstone Glow, everyone's favourite Skaven paint, because I'm a big Skaven fan. Or not for this. And I'm probably going to come up with some kind of a wash with the moot green to try and make it look a little bit more glowy, but I'll see how that goes. I'm not going to 100% on that until I know I'm happy. Right, so I'm getting to the point where I'm nearly done, so I'm into exciting time now, where I just do the little extra bits. So at the end of the day, I'm trying to make something that's good for tabletop, good for games. I love sitting down with some models and going into huge detail, but this one, it's just a bit of fun really. Scenery is good. So yeah, so next thing I think I'm going to do is finish off these lanterns. Then I'll probably go for painting these two little ponds up with a view to leaving for the next 24 hours some of this still water. And I'm quite excited. I've never done it before. I have no idea how it'll turn out, but I've read a couple of guides on it. And then tomorrow, when it's all finished, I'll varnish it. After doing that, and beforehand, I'll try a little bit of weathering, which I'm going to do with homemade pigments out of the highly expensive artist pastel set, which I bought off Amazon. I've read some guides on how you can do it, and basically I'm going to give that a go and use my fixing powder to see if I can make it happen. So I'll probably stop this video for today. I'll just do this little bit of painting on the lanterns. I might quick film before I go. Oh, well, I'll do this water first, so I will film that. So I'm waffling on. So the next thing to do is get this water. The way I intend to do this, there's two depressions in here. They don't look particularly deep, but I've basically cut with a Dremel holes into the MDF. So they're kind of probably a couple of millimetres deep, each hole. And I'm going to paint the bottom of those holes with a very slimy green colour. I'm going to probably use the army green colour from Army Painter, although I maybe even try using moot green and go for a slightly more toxic look. And I'm going to put it into those, just basically gently paint the bottom of the holes, and then I'm going to try putting this still water over top of it and see how it comes out. Just to add, I did a mix of a tiny bit of the moot green into my Warpstone Glow and sort of blended it in with a very slightly tacky paint, and it actually came out really quite well. So as a wash, it's really a sort of an overwash, so you can see through it, and it looks almost like there's a steam inside, and hopefully it'll dry that way. It probably won't, but it's still good nonetheless. I'm quite pleased with it. So I thought I'd film my little experiment. I've actually put a little bit of the of Games Workshop Cabalite Green into the holes, just at the bottom as a kind of very thin bottom line. And in this bit of old plastic, I've mixed up a little bit of Army Painter green, Army Green. And basically, I'm going to take this bottle of still water and I'm going to pour it into this, mix it up, and pour it into the holes. Now, I need both my hands to do it because this stuff isn't cheap, and I want to make sure that I do it properly and get it well mixed and try and not get any bubbles, which is the crime of the century with this. Once you put it in the holes, I'll show you what it looks like. But I'm quite excited by it. It takes 24 hours to dry. I've put a bit in the bowl with the green paint. I've never done this, so I've no idea whether I've done too much or too little. I suspect it's definitely not too much. I've got a brush here which I haven't dried because I've just been doing the video camera. So let's just clear that off. Right, and basically you mix it together, and in theory it should look a bit like sludgy water. This is the problem of only having one hand, but you get the general idea. So I'm going to take this away because it looks a bit like something you would find if you have a bad cold. That's what we need to say on that. And I'm gonna, actually I'm doing the cardinal sin here of mixing this with what I'm doing, because I've now put loads of bubbles in it. So I'm going to have to get a pin as I put it in the liquid and smash and kill the bubbles. Well, that's my own fault, and it's an education. Right, so I've made the liquid up. It's very green in colour, but that's not a problem because I want it to look kind of very sludgy and slightly suspicious. So obviously it's very bright as well at the moment. It's self-leveling, so in theory it fills the hole. It's not, I've kind of let it go where it goes. I have left a little bit of it behind in the thing because it dries in a film and you can take it off. And I'm going to try an experiment where you can take a piece out and cut it up. My children seem to be fighting each other outside. Good games. And I'm going to leave this to dry and see how it feels. Now it looks very, very bright because the light, of course, is the video camera picks out the light. But generally, there's a swell of green, and in a couple of spots you can see the colour underneath. It's very hard to see if I zoom right in without touching it, otherwise it'll be foul. And you get the general idea. So for me, this is a bit of an adventure. If it works, I'll put some things around the edges of it, maybe a couple more stone, just to make the puddles look like they're bound, not sort of sitting proud at the surface. Hopefully I've got enough depth in there. I've never used this stuff. It's an experiment. If it goes wrong, you peel it out and throw it away. So that's it. So aside from that, it's generally finished. I've got to be very careful turning this around because of my sludgy piles. I am going to put extra bits of scenery on there. I've got some barrels and things I'm going to put down just to sort of add value. Must make sure that stays flat. And like I said, so I'll probably add some extra bits. I'm going to put a lamppost on the outside, which you get free with the kit. But in general, that's it, and it's not too bad. So 24 hours have passed. As you can see, unfortunately, my puddles have holes in. It looks like they've cracked, and from what I've read on the internet, this is because I've probably put it on a little bit too thick. It's apparently best done in little layers, unless you're doing lots of it when it can hold itself together. But with this kind of thing, I've probably overdone it. But the good news is you put a small thin layer on top and these cracks should go. The bad news is I've got to wait another 24 hours for it to dry. But they look okay. They are actually quite a dull green in colour, which is kind of what I wanted, like scoopy, mucky industrial water. I think the camera's probably making them look a bit bright. I think if you were making ice though, you could get some quite nice crack effects if you had a blue bait, if you painted it blue underneath. Had kept it clear, that would actually probably look quite good. I put a bit of snow around it or something, but for what I want, it looks like my puddles have turned to jelly. Right, so I'm going to put a thin layer on top, fill up the holes, and leave it till tomorrow. So the learning how to use the Vallejo Still Water continues. Basically, I thought that the other green was a bit light, and to do a bit of contrast, I've added a couple of drops of Army Painted green tone. Or you could just use Games Workshop green equivalent, and I've mixed a little bit of that in. You can still see some of the cracks, but they've filled up with this green layer, and I suspect I'm probably going to have to add multiple thin layers to sort of hide it out if I want to do that. But in a way, I kind of like them. It looks like the earth is kind of opened up underneath them. It's a bit cracked. So I'm going to see how it dries, and if necessary I'll add a little bit more tomorrow, but there's no rush. I'll add as many layers as it takes. Anyway, this looks a lot better. Got a tone of the light green underneath, and you can sort of like it's been stained on the ground, and then this darker green on top. So we shall see, or alternatively I'll pull it out. So a second application, I've actually moved it to a level surface because I realised that the table I've been using is actually slightly off level, so obviously the liquid flowed in one direction. I've had the spirit level out this time, and I've got a much darker green. I put probably 5 or 6 drips of the Army Painter green ink into this, just with the hope that, and it really has made it two-tones, so it's hard to see, the light isn't brilliant, but it's now going a little dark. It's covered up most of the cracks. I've had a plan in process, but I'm making some barrels which are down there, which are made out of some little old pieces I got from a children's board game. I'm going to put them by the sides of it, and they're now going to become sort of leaky, toxic, foul stuff. There we go. Okay, so time has passed, yet another 24 hours, and these have dried an awful lot better now. And I know what the mistake was now. Success factor number 1 for using still water is to make sure your table is not on a slope, which this one is. I thought it was even, it was level, but it wasn't. It's level horizontally, but it's actually tilting slightly forwards. As a result, the mixture was rolling very gently forwards, and it cracked around the edges as a result. I took it indoors last night, left it on a level windowsill, and I don't know whether it was also the temperature, because it's starting to get a bit chilly in the evenings. It's come out quite well. Some of the edges where it's a little bit cracked don't look so bad now, because this darker mix kind of make it look like the ground underneath is cracked and this stuff's just poured in. I'm also going to put a couple of barrels over the top to make it look like it's toxic sludge. So another point of interest, I've made some little barrels which are sort of sitting in the edges of the sludge. I sprayed them red, although they're quite hard to get the primer to stick to, so hopefully it'll stay this way. And then I've coated them with just dabs of typhus corrosion. And in a moment I'm going to sort of rust them up, but I want to make sure they're thoroughly dry, and then I'm going to varnish them straight away, just try and protect that paint straight away with a matte varnish. These are the things I was using. If anyone in the UK has ever seen the kids board game Frustration, which is a bit like Ludo with a pop of dice, I've taken these things basically and put a bit of green stuff in the bottom, which looks like it's where the sort of liquid's coming out of, for the one that's on its side over there. And you can cut them in half like I've done with that one there, so that's the half barrel or the 2/3 barrel, like it's embedded in the ground, and I've got the sludge around the side. So I'm going to let this typhus corrosion really thoroughly dry, and of course it's very textured, it's very grainy, and I'm going to quickly hit it with a bit of this, yet another dry, because like I said I went mad one day and I've got a pair of this riser rust, and these two paints are meant to go together. So I'll just basically dry brush some of the riser rust over the typhus corrosion, and it should make it like a very good rust effect. And then I'll probably just doll up Agrax Earthshade all over them to make them look a bit filthy. And then let it dry, varnish. So the Adhoc earth shade is still drying, and this is coming up very bright, but basically typhus corrosion on them, a bit of riser rust, and the Adhoc earth shade is still very wet, so it's going to take a little while to dry because it's quite shiny, the surface, so got to be really careful how you put everything on, but that will dry pretty nicely. It's hard to see because the light, it's got a bit dim outside, so I'm having to use a light, but basically but actually I think they look pretty good. I'm quite pleased with them. So in general they sort of add that effect. So the final thing I'm going to do, at least for this video, I might do some little bits and bobs, is make some weathering powder and try it out on the walkways. And basically what I've done is I've taken a fifth of one of those pastels, which I've done before, very small artist pastels. Taken a black one, broken a thumbnail piece sort of size off, and crushed it with that, which is now no longer suitable for home use, so I'll deal with the consequences of that later. And I'm going to sort of push this in to the walkways and play a little of this pigment binder and see how we get on. So I think I'll do a little bit as an experiment, then I might film a bit. So basically, as you can see, I'm just crushing down and getting a little bit of this on a medium sort of size dry brush, and I'm trying to make it look like there's areas where there's been some kind of blast damage or muck done. So I'm going to do the edges basically, and really it is simply a case of, it comes on quite powdery, but you force it into the gaps, force it down, so I'll take a little bit on there, and then just basically rub it in. There's no other way to describe it. Try and get a sort of the sooty effect on the thing, so it looks like something has happened there. I mean, this is such a cheap, I mean, to buy weathering powders from what I've seen, you're looking at about £3 to £4 a bottle, so I don't know, what's that, $5, I don't know. And you know, you get quite a lot out of it and it's really good, but I saw a vid where a guy was doing just this, whose name totally escapes me. It was Simon someone. He's got lots of YouTube videos, and if you search for pigment, make your own pigment, you'll see him straight away, and basically it's really effective. And you know, I've got 12 colours in that, and you can buy an 18 one for like less than a £5. It was just the only one that was in stock because I wanted it delivered next day. But that, I think, looks pretty decent, and of course we'll see how the binder goes on and how it dries, but you can see how using different colours, I mean, I think for another build I'd probably use a muddy effect, so it's like someone's treaded dirt around there. I think I'll apply the same thing on the balcony, exactly the same effect, but it looks like for whatever those areas have got blast damage. I mean, potentially I could put it on the ground as well, which I may well do actually. I may pick a little spot and go to town with this and see how the pigment binder goes, but I think I'm probably going to finish. I'll just quickly finish the application. The pigment binder you basically dab on over the top, so I'm not going to film that because it's not very exciting to watch someone dab a liquid onto well, although saying that is the nature of painting, but you know what I mean. And then I'll finish up because it's quite a long video, but it's been really good fun. I'm no expert. A lot of the stuff I've learned comes from some fantastic YouTubers. I mean, some of the tips and tricks I've used for this, I've learned through watching Mel, the terrain shooter, whose video series are absolutely fantastic. And if you are ever into doing scenery, I just can't recommend a better website than Mel's. And equally, the whole idea to get off with this was down to just watching some of the community, some of the 40k community and the Age of Sigmar community. Some cracking people out there. Particularly love the Andy and Rem show. Well worth it if you're into Age of Sigmar. For some great tips, but basically that's it. So I've got a lot more building to do. I'm making a lot more scenery. I'm just getting this room ready. I'll just do a quick final shot, maybe stick some blood angels on it for context, and that's it. Thanks very much for watching. I've got lots more stuff coming, not all about painting. I'm going to try and do some bat reps in the future, and maybe moan and whinge about the general universe. But thank you very much for watching. You'll see the final shots in a minute, and thank you. So, this is it finished. Glammed up with a few blood angels. That's the front of the building. I think it's come out pretty well actually. Quite blasted look. Looks a bit dirty, a bit unloved. Very pleased with it. Overall, well worth doing. Of course, anything red, such as blood angels in this kind of day with this kind of camera, always comes out looking a bit pink and bright. Take the word for it, it looks pretty decent. Right, I'll just flick it around. And the rear view, I'll probably put another couple of pieces on it when I've finished some of the other buildings and make it maybe slightly more busy on the back, but generally I think that's fine. The weather and stuff's come out quite well. It took a hell of a long time to dry, so that's a lesson learned there. And yeah, very pleased with this. So if you like this, please subscribe. I'll be doing lots more videos. Like it, leave comments, tell me it's rubbish, tell me it's great, whatever you feel like doing. But for now, thank you very much.